The sun's down, the soldering iron's hot, and you know what that means. Welcome to Night School, where the zip ties are tight, the code is questionable, and the LEDs never sleep. Hosted by the one and only Bobby, the professor of Pixel Mayhem. We're diving deep into lighting tips, tech fails, sketchy workarounds, and the secrets nobody teaches until now. Whether you're mapping props at midnight or just here for the chaos, this is your crash course in RGB enlightenment. So grab your beverage of choice and remember, there's no syllabus, no rules, and no guarantee we'll make it out with all our fingers. This is Night School.
Hey everyone. Welcome back to Night School. Last week we had Brian on here helping out. I'd like to thank him for covering for me. So, I can get my heart checked out after that Bills game of roller coaster that we had. Tonight we have Russell McFarland. He's going to be talking about 30 things you should do before you set up your light show. He is around here somewhere. Russ, are you there? Oh, there you are. There you are. Man, I mean, you put you backstage for a second and you disappear.
I run off, picking out.
Yeah. So how you doing there?
Doing great, man. How are you?
Good. Yeah, I heard you're going back to school now.
Yes, amongst all the other things I need to do. So taking some classes. So anyway, gonna run off, do a paper after this. So got all my academia today. After being in night school, I get to go to more night school.
All right. Well, let's get right to it then.
All right. Cool. So I thought this was a good topic. This is something that so first of all, my name is Russell McFarland. I've been doing pixel shows for, I guess, 9-10 years now. So I got started in 2016. So I guess if you count that, it might be my 10th year. I've always enjoyed teaching beginners and new things. But as we talked about, different topics that need to be out there, one of the things that we haven't really talked about, we talk a lot about setting things up in X-Lights and setting things up, kind of learning power injection and learning mapping and things like that. But taking a step back, what do you need to do to be efficient and to have yourself ready and your home ready? So when you set up the light show, your first light show, or later light shows, you've got things ready. You're not just scrambling around and frustrated and trying to find tools and things. So I sat down for a good amount of time and said, what are things that I'm reaching for most often? What are things that I'm always wandering around for and looking for and wishing I had on hand and things like that. So let's make a kind of a central list of things. And so I started jotting down things. I said, it's going to be 30 or 30. And then once I started writing them down, I'm like, it might be 50 and might be 100. So I kept growing and growing. So anyway, we're going to talk about those things tonight and kind of break it up into different segments. So is that good, Bob? You got any questions? And if y'all have questions as we go along, let me know. I'll be glad to answer stuff, or we can answer them at the end, or you want to get a hold of me later, that's fine too.
Yeah, just comment below and we'll ask Russell those questions.
Yeah. So as I thought about it, there's kind of 6 different areas of preparation that, I wanted to address. And those are planning up front, safety and safety items and all that, supplies that you're going to need, things that you want to consider when you're mounting props. And that's probably a whole separate class as I dove into it. But, things that you want to have on hand and things that I use to make sure you're able to mount stuff without taking 20 trips to Home Depot. Different tools that I find that I frequently use. And once again, it's not like every single thing, but it's the most common things that I use and like, as well as things to do repairs and make sure you have spares with, because that's another thing is we have a very small window of time that we run our light shows. You only have a month or two. And so each moment that you're down, each hour, each day that you're down is a big thing. So try to plan ahead for that. So first of all, we'll talk about supplies to have on hand. These are things that I find you go through frequently. A lot of, they're kind of obvious, but they're things that you tend to chew through. First being is, extension cords. We talk a lot about the pixel side of things and the 12 volt, 5 volt side of things, but we don't really talk a lot about powering your display. So you really need to have a lot of extension cords on hand. I have, two giant totes full of them. And you don't want just cheapies, 12 to 14 gauge when you're running your main lines from your outlets and all that. Plan for that. And then I'll actually have, heavy gauge extension cords with their landscape based that have like 3 outlets that are probably 3 or 4 feet apart. And that helps me spread stuff out down the line of pixel controllers and all that. So make sure you plan out for your extension cords well. Another thing I learned is you're not popping GFCIs all the time. Go out there and loop them and put them behind a controller up on a T-post or whatever. Try to keep the actual connections off the ground. I raise those up a little bit, and that really helps a lot with popping GFCIs. And like I said, I have a whole bunch of them. I don't think you can never have enough, and they're handy to use throughout the year as well. To that end, pixel extensions are a big deal. I find myself going through a whole bunch of those as well, more than you ever expect. And so what I say is, figure out how many you think you need and then double it. Get all different lengths. You don't want to just go crazy and buy all long ones. They need to be appropriately sized, and you don't want to daisy chain them to some crazy long length. But have different sizes where it's appropriate. Color code them. The vendors have done a good job of that lately, offering color coded extensions with either labels or different colored nuts or whatever. But if you're like me and have a bunch of older stuff that wasn't pre-labeled, I have my own color-coded system that we'll talk about in a little bit. But go out there, and that way you can tell when you have helpers, hey, because it's hard to tell if you've got a 5 foot, 10 foot, a 20 foot, but I can go tell them, give me 2 reds and a blue or whatever, and you can get consistent results. Plus it helps you as you're tearing down, you can, organize stuff easily. So get color coded stuff or color code your own. Zip ties, man. I've got a picture as I was setting up. I should have put it in here. I use well over 1,000 a season. And we use them for everything. We use them for mounting props with, for organizing cables with, for storage. When you put stuff back together, I'll take a bundle of Coro and zip tie some props together. I'll loop up the extensions for them and wire tie them to the back of the prop so that I won't have them dragging everywhere. And we use just thousands of them. So have those on hand. I probably use 8 and 11 inch, probably 11 inch the most. Longer ones are handy as well. I've got a place on my front porch where we hang a big thing down, and we use the big HVAC, like 30-inch zip ties, and they're handy because they're strong, they're quick. When you're done, you just clip them loose. And so have those. Don't buy super cheap ones. If you find some deal on Amazon or whatever, they're probably painful. You can tell when you get cheap zip ties. They don't. We were talking about that earlier. They don't clasp well. You can really just feel them when they get cheap, and it's just not worth it. So I think the Lowe's house brand are pretty good. Both Lowe's and Home Depot have pretty good ones. You can go drive yourself crazy and start looking at reviews online and all that. Project Farm's always a good source to go and look at reviews for those kind of things on YouTube. But have a lot of zip ties on hand. Those are invaluable. It's a great way to go out there and put stuff together pretty easily, and you can always go clip it loose. Get the black ones; those are UV rated. The white ones are not. And if you don't leave it out for any length of time, it probably doesn't matter. But the black ones will hold up to the sun over time better than the white ones or the clear ones. Electrical tape, it's not just for its common use. I have a whole color-coded system that I use, not just for length of cables, but I have Raywu mixed in with X-Connect in my show. And to be able, once again, to help myself identify things and helpers identify things, I've got a color-coded system that it means something to me when, something's orange and something's blue. I can go out there and tell what's what. So you can come up with some clever things too, things that mean things to you. Like when I have a power injection port on a controller, that's always yellow. When I have something that's really woo, it's going to be orange, and then an associated length. The red ones are the long ones, the blue ones are the medium ones, and unlabeled are the short ones for me. And you can come up with your own coding, and that is super helpful when you go and start digging through and set up and tear down, where you can go when you got cables scattered everywhere. I can look on the ground and tell exactly what they are without having to pick them up and try to size them up and look at the ends. And little steps like that help you, make you so much more efficient over time. Don't buy cheap electrical tape either. That's painful. It's gummy and it falls apart and it just leaves a residue. Buy 3M electrical tape. That's well worth it. So do that. Network switches is something that don't get talked about a lot. Our shows run on a network, and they scatter across the yard. If you have a super small show, it may not be a big deal, but it's not even the size of the show. I try to go out there and, I've got my front porch as a central point, and then things kind of go left and right, up and down. So I have a couple cheap network switches on either side of the porch that feed different sides of the yard. And by doing that, it keeps me from having to jump over sidewalks and do different things. And it makes it a lot more convenient to kind of stack those things up on side to side, so I can feed different sides of the yard from a network switch. So I don't have to run it all back to a central point. I kind of distribute it out. So think about where your controllers are going to be located. You can get these things for 20, 30, 40 bucks. They're not super expensive. How are you getting back to your home network? So for me, I've got to drop straight out of the attic down to the front porch. And then from there, once again, I don't want to have to run everything back to the attic. I want to distribute it out from there. So I've got side to side, couple switches. Think about that. Some modern controllers have switches built in where you can kind of daisy chain in and out. But once again, if it doesn't make sense to, even if you're daisy chaining, if you got to go back across the yard or, back across a way that doesn't make sense, it may not be the most efficient way, and you may just be tangling yourself up in cords unnecessarily. So look at the possibility of a network switch. And this is not for receivers, smart receivers or dumb receivers. This is for feeding, data into your controller from the IP side of things. So they're not for receivers, but that helps out a lot. And I think that gets missed a lot when we talk about getting ready for setup. Network cables, same deal as power cables. Chew through a bunch of them, because you don't just use them to feed your controller, you use them for receivers as well. So you've got, stuff. I'll have an 8-port controller right here, and then as I've added stuff on, I'll have a 4-port receiver beside it. So I'll even do, just a short 5-foot network cable in between the two, because that's what I've got on hand, and I'll put them side by side. So I've got, 5-foot cables all the way up to 100-foot cable that I use to kind of spire things across the yard and get the different receivers, get the different controllers, and have those on hand. And don't mess with making it, doing it yourself. I don't think it's worth it. It gets kind of, unless you do this stuff a lot, and people argue with this, and people argue with everything, but unless you do this stuff a lot, it's aggravating and slow. It's not hard. It's just kind of a pain in the rear. And I find they're kind of glitchy sometimes. And so these things are so cheap to buy. I think I would just buy them pre-made and not fool with trying to crimp your own and all that. You can, but it's just one more variable to worry about. And I think the factory cables are just better. So I would stick with that, unless you're some whiz-bang guy that's doing thousands of feet of Cat 6 a night, or a day. It's part of your job or whatever. But for somebody that's just doing it once a year, I don't think it's worth it. So it's my own philosophy. Dielectric grease. So I see people flickering and having different problems after a rainstorm. So one of the things I've experienced and I do is we put a little drop of Corrosion X on every pixel extension that I plug in. I do it on the AC power side as well. But I'll put like a little squirt of Corrosion X in there. Not a lot, don't get carried away, but and that has really helped things from water intrusion and all that, because those little cheap O-rings on the extension cables and on the pigtails aren't that great. I mean, they do fine, but if you put a little of this on there as you're setting up, then it really helps. And I think it stopped a lot of my water problems and flickering problems. And so when we're setting up, we've got multiple bottles of it floating around the yard. And so everybody's like, where's the bottle? Where's the bottle? So while we're just going in there, and it's something that only takes a few seconds to do as you're plugging everything in. And for me, it's made a big difference. So I use Crozinex on about everything. And that's a good thing to have around. This is a weird one, but it is a big part of my show. Wood scraps. So I like to have wood scraps around when you're setting things up. So it's little things like leveling ladders. If I feel like something's kind of off center or dangerous or whatever, I'll go out there and secure things up with spare pieces of plywood or whatever. It only takes a few seconds and it makes me feel a lot more secure. I'm not going to get on an unstable ladder. So I use that for that. Things like your portable hole, I want to make sure everything's level and nice. And so we'll use different levels of wood scrap and everything else to kind of get those things evened out, leveled out. As we're setting up props, we keep screws laying around and everything else. I'll go and grab a few wood scraps and keep something, make something level or hold like a little lip to hold a prop from sliding off an edge or whatever. So having a little pile of wood scraps around for me is very helpful. It's stuff that, once again, you would never think about, but as you can just grab a couple scraps and stick them together, all the stuff is temporary construction. And so with a little bit of wood scraps and a few screws, you can go out there and shore stuff up, make stuff even level, support things better, find ways to keep props from sliding around or blowing around. So that's helpful to me. That's a secret pro tip. So that's kind of things I like to have on hand. One of the most important things you can do is really plan well. And before you start, going and hanging stuff up, you need to make sure you have a great plan. That really starts with your X-Lights layout. That gives you an opportunity to kind of prototype things, to go out there, lay your props out, lay everything out, run some sequences, see how things look, see if it looks symmetrical to you, if things look wonky, and you can go out there and really play with it. And then you can go out there and export your models and get a whole host of information. You'll know how many pixels you have total. If you've associated them with controllers, you can kind of look at your controllers and see, where this stuff's going to plug into. You can look at your, estimated amperage draw and your current draw and everything else. And you can get a lot of information out of X-Lights without ever touching a thing and setting, something up physically. So, get your layout done and prototyped and done well. Controller placement is really to your benefit to have stuff close to the props. Somebody told me this one time, because we always think about controllers being expensive, and they are. Controllers are expensive, but you look at the cost of a controller from I don't know what, 80 to $250, something like that. But which we and plus you got to add the cost of an enclosure and pigtails and extensions and all that stuff. But if you look at a spinner, we'll buy a Coro spinner for $100, and so we kind of think we have weird looks at some of that stuff. So anyway, I'm a believer in keeping controllers close to your props, keeping things. If you need to decentralize a little bit, do it. It helps you, not be as reliant on a single controller. So if it dies, you can kind of move things around or adjust. And so you don't want to just go overboard and have controllers everywhere. But I was talking to somebody recently in my hometown about that, and he was all concerned about going and soldering all these props together in strips, and it was going to be complicated. I'm like, man, just put these things on different outputs, and you won't have to join all these props together and do all this complicated stuff. And so it was really kind of a philosophical thing of, do you want to save a few controller ports, or do you really want to go out there and have all these things soldered and daisy chained and a real complex setup of connected props? And so we had a good discussion there. It's just different schools of thought. Neither is right or wrong, but either way, think about your controller placement as you're planning and saying, all right, I've got two controllers. I'm going to put one on this side and one on that side, or I've got a big mega tree here. I need to dedicate a controller to that, or think about what you're going to do before you do it. And that will help you buy the right extensions. It'll help you know where to run your power from, and keep your AC power in mind. As your show gets bigger, you're not going to be able to run it on a single circuit anymore, which most homes, all their exterior outlets are on one single circuit. So if you can go out there and I'll do that. I've got one feeding out of my garage that's on a separate circuit, and then one on the porch. And then over on the AC side of things, or the HVAC side of things, I've got another dedicated outlet. So as you design your layout, you think about, all right, where do I have power from the house? Where can I kind of plug into and get that done? So planning all that ahead of time helps. This is a big one for me. Get your friends and family involved. My family and my friends are a great help to me in the show setting up. And frankly, I don't know if I would do it if it wasn't for people rallying around me and helping. So while they may not know all the technical nitty gritty, they can come and help set stuff up, help mount things, and over time they get to be where they get familiar with things. Not you're always going to have that technical. At the end of the day, you're going to have to wire it and configure it and do the things. But I have people, in my circle of family and friends come over every year and help. And that's a great encouragement. I think it gives them a lot of pride, in the community, saying, hey, this is something that I help with and we put on, and it's a lot of fun. And so it's an encouragement. So it keeps you from getting so ground down. So I've got, like I said, I'm fortunate to have good friends and family. And I think if you try to include them, people are pretty receptive to that. So anyway, do that. And I think you'll find that helpful. And that's something that I don't think we talk about enough. I think we shoulder it all, ourselves as being the people that understand it and all that. But if you can get your friends and family involved, it's a big help. And it's kind of a neat tradition. I have them every year asking, like, when are we going to do the Christmas lights? So, try to get them involved. I have hit more things in my yard than I care to admit. So try to know where things are. You're not going to know where everything is, but I've got a pretty good idea of where my cable is and where my main sprinklers run through and all that. Call 811. That'll deal with the public utility side. Now that doesn't help you with your sprinkler system or your own water and sewer lines and things on your side of the meter. But try to think about where things are. I had this conversation with my wife last year. We're going to a line of candy canes, and it's a very narrow strip of land that we have, and that's exactly where our cable TV goes and all that. I'm like, there's no way, we can't go there and booger up the cable. And like I said, I've hit the sprinkler lines more than once, putting holes in the yard, driving things in. So be cognizant of where things are. And once again, over time, I've gotten a lot more aware of where things are and try to avoid those if you can, because I swear, even though you're putting a small hole in the ground or a small stake, you're going to hit something. So try to be aware of that. This is a big one. So test and mark each prop. So when I go and push a prop, I will write the year that I did it so that I can just remember. A lot of modern Pixel strings will have quality tags on now and tell you the manufacturing date, but that wasn't always the case, and it still isn't the case with all of them. So that way I can say, man, these Pixels are only like a year old or 2 years old, or when did we get this prop or whatever. Just by Sharpie's a valuable tool. Writing the number, and I also didn't put this in the presentation, but I'll put a label, and you can barely see it in this picture, but I put a label on each pigtail. So this flake, I think, is 450 nodes. I think I've got 200 on one section and then 250 on another one. So I'll put output 1 200, output 2 250, and that way I know how many. If my X-Lite config gets messed up or whatever, I'll know. All right, this has 450 total, 200 here, 250 here, and I'll know by looking at the pixel pigtails which one's which, because I've labeled them. And then I'll also mark the top of each prop, and that way when you're hanging stuff, or if you got a friend helping you, you'll know what way's oriented up and down. So if you look carefully right there, it's got top, and a lot of them I'll put big arrows on and all that, and I'll say top. And then test it. Run a bars test before you go and hang stuff up way high, and see, make sure that the top's the top, because there's no real spinning it later, and it will always fail. You can physically spin it, but you can't go in software and just easily spin it. So, never fail something up that's mounted high and difficult if you've kind of mounted things wrong. So anyway, test it, mark it, and you'll thank yourself later.
Yeah, I'd like to remind everybody, if you have any questions, please put them in chat, and we'll have Russell answer them.
Yes. Please do. Ask away. So every year on the forums, another thing we see is, people will have a controller that will, usually right here at the power input terminals or somewhere, will be burned up. And this controller's burned out. What happened? And as things heat up and cool down, expand and contract, those can get loose. And so it's one of the things I try to do every year is just quickly go over things with a screwdriver, make sure things are snugged up on the controller. And I think it's a big thing when it comes to safety, as well as just good preparation, and you're not burning up a controller. Go out there and test things and make sure you don't have a bunch of loose connections. I'll go and tug on each pigtail set of wires, make sure nothing's loose. I'll tighten everything down, and just kind of quick 2-3 minutes with a screwdriver, just make sure everything's okay. So speaking of that, safety, every year people are injured, and it's not just people that we see on TV or whatever. My friend Mark Valentine in the hobby, he's a good friend of mine. He was severely hurt setting up for Christmas several years back. Spent a long time in the hospital, and it was really ugly. And so fortunately he's okay now, but that was really scary. Had a ladder accident just trying to set stuff up. So anyway, another guy was killed in my community a few years ago by falling off a roof setting up for Christmas. So it's scary. So there's things that I try to do I've learned over time to try to work safe. I'll get through a few of those. So this pitch hopper is something I discovered several years ago, I think a roofing group. But it's neat. It'll have two sides to it. It's just got a kind of a sticky foam bottom, but then it's got two different pitches where you can go for steep roofs or not as steep roofs. Gives you a secure place to stand. So we've got two of them. I don't do a ton of roof work, but where we do get up on it, it's very steep. And so that way we can have a secure place to step and work our way across the roof. And it is a lot more secure than it used to be. So we'll go and have those things out, hand them, and kind of work our way across. And you've got a safe, secure, level place to stand when you're on the roof. So that is a big one, and that helps us out a lot. So stabilizers, I've got stabilizers on every extension ladder. And that gives a great sense of security. It's not nearly as twisty and all that. These came off of Amazon. It's more friends and family I was talking about. It's a good example of that, even in the pictures. So anyway, having those stabilizers on extension ladders keep things where it pushes you off the roof a little bit, keeps things a lot more secure. It's amazing the stability. I won't get on an extension ladder without a stabilizer on it. I just flat out won't. It's too twisty, too dangerous. So those help out a lot. I have appropriately sized ladders for the job. So if you notice, that's a 12-foot A-frame ladder in the right-hand picture. And that lets me, basically be able to work on stuff without having to reach or get up on the very top rung of something. So, once again, that wide base keeps us stable. It keeps us safe, and it's well worth it. So those are tools that I bought, first year, and I'm still using to this day, and it helps out a lot, and it's way cheaper than an ER visit. So I use a lift when needed. When we're setting up the outline there in that picture, you're spending a whole lot of time, and the roof lines are awkward where they, protrude out in the house. And so you can't get a ladder. The way this bottom is right here, it kind of juts out where you can't get a ladder up real well. And so anyway, it's just not worth it. So we get a lift, and, we've put permanent outlines up where, you don't really have a need to go up there a lot. But if we do, I'm renting a lift. And it's just, like I said, it's just a smart thing to do. And so do that. And it's a lot easier to work. I mean, you're stable. You can hold tools up there with you. We'll send a bucket up and down for parts, and it's a lot more stable. So it seems expensive on the surface. It's a few $100s for the weekend, but it's well worth it not to be hurt and injured and all that. And once again, you have a whole lot less fatigue working that way than just wrestling a ladder up and down and around the house. So if you're in the bucket, wear a harness to keep you secure so you're not falling out. And then, you can go out there and have these low profile mounts. I know a lot of people do that. I've actually got some of these, you can snap extensions into them as well. Like if you wanted to do a walkboard or mount something to your roof, you can. But anyway, that way you've got a place to clip in. It's secure. It's low profile. It's, up under the shingle so it's not going to leak. And you're not really going to see it, but you have a place to clip in if you need to work up high. So, that's a good investment as well. So mounting supplies, and I think we should do a whole nother class on just mounting because there are so many different ways to mount props and so many different schools of thought. There's some great 3D printed designs. There's some, a lot of different solutions with maker pipe and sandbags and PVC, a lot of different schools of thought. So some of the things I keep on hand are fishing line. That's strong, cheap, easy. You can cut it down, it's disposable. And so I'll use braided fishing line to mount some things. Screws of all sizes, like I talked about with the wood pile and all that. So some props I'll screw to things. Some props I'll do different things with, but I'll keep screws of all sizes around because when we go and mount things into the house, we do different props of a lot of different natures. We're always using screws, so I'll keep an organized, basically tackle box full of screws. Masonry anchors, I used to try not to drill into the house, but then props got bigger and denser and heavier, and I got sick of fighting things. So masonry anchors, I've got just a few plastic anchors with screws coming out, and I can hang things from those securely from the brick. You don't notice them in the off season. Never had any problems with it. I use a lot of T-posts, which are like electric fence posts, both for mounting props, for mounting controllers, keeping them out of the dirt. Don't just put controllers in the dirt. I saw somebody post a picture just this week of a controller just absolutely drowned from water intrusion, and it was laying in a flower bed. And the enclosure didn't work like it's supposed to, but if it would have been hanging up, out of the dirt, out of the ground, it probably wouldn't have leaked quite like that. So, you can use 2x4s and 4x4s. I do that in some instances to mount things up with. Sandbags for the roof, keep things secure and weighted down. And there's a whole lot of stuff with PVC and EMT. So I try to keep that, especially EMT. I keep a lot of EMT around because I'll drive it in behind props, hold up mini trees, hold up arches, things like that. It's cheap. It's a few dollars a stick. It's strong. It's lightweight. It packs down real easy. I can cut it to length. And so I'll use a lot of EMT as well. So there's some picture examples of that and my display, except for the bottom left, not mine, but so 4x4 holding up the snowflake tree just because it's a lot of weight and something that I use Unistrut across the back. Here's this one really isn't a T-post, that's just a cheap garden post, but an example of how I mount my controllers. I'll run a piece of electric fence wire, and I use a lot of that in my display too, across the back just to keep things elevated out of the moisture, and keep it where I can look at it, work on it. Mega flake there with EMT frames. This is a quick frame out of wood. Got some props standing up there, and these are all PVC and sandbags for snowflakes on the roof. Masonry anchors. So I'll do this is exactly what I do. I'll go out there, drive it in a slow profile, and then I'll go and wrap electric fence wire around the screw there, and that'll help me, mount a big flake or whatever up top. And I'll do one down bottom to keep it from blowing in the wind as well. And then on my porch, I use some fishing line, kind of keep it low profile. You can't see it. And, it's something that's not going to damage the paint. It's not metal, being wrapped round and around with electric fence wire and all that. So it tends to work out pretty well on the porch. So I use it on the porch and a few other places where, stuff needs to hang, but I don't want it to be, rub up against things and destroy paint and all that. So more mounting supplies, ratchet straps. I use that on my Megatree as guide wires, kind of pull things back. I find those strong, easy to adjust, cheap. So I'll use ratchet straps with climbing slings. I've got listed down bottom. So that's it's just basically a big loop of strong material that you can kind of cinch over itself and pull back on the Megatree pole with. And there's different ways to do that, but that's kind of things I've got laying around that I've got on hand. Ground anchors, I use them, the long 18-inch screw anchors. That's another thing we seem to use a lot of, to mount your portable hole with and get it lashed down to get all your guide wires tied back with. So we tend to go through a lot of ground anchors as well. So those are things I try to keep on hand because once again, you're stopping the whole process of setting up a Megatree or whatever when you're going and dig around for those things. So I'll keep them all contained, and we use them in the off season as well, for bouncy houses for the kids or whatever. So you find different uses for these things during the year. I use Unistrut to mount things with a good bit. And so that's the material I've got right here. And I'll keep a lot of that on hand. And once again, cut it to length. You can wire tie through the holes. It's strong. It's light. You can go out there and, got a lot of different accessories. You can slide into the track for bolts and mounting things. And so I'll use Unistrut a good bit and keep that on hand. I'll keep 2 or 3 rolls of electric fence wire around because once again, that's something that's, cheap for a whole big spool to last forever. And I'll reel off just sections as I'm mounting props or tying stuff down or whatever, snip it off, and I'm off to the races. So that's another thing that I keep around a lot. And then when you're done during teardown, you just cut it all loose and throw it away. Maker pipe, once again, there's some brilliant designs for the Maker pipe out there. I've got Maker pipe that I use some, but there's some really good engineers out there with some really good solutions. So if you're into that, you can get on the Facebook groups and look with Maker pipe and fittings. And that's a good thing to have laying around because you can do some pretty cool things pretty quickly with it. So tools, the list of tools are endless, but some of the things that I tend to grab for a lot, level when you're setting things up, socket set for when you're setting up, your Megatree hoop or your, some of the stuff related to the pole. And once again, with Unistrut, I use different bolts to hold different sections together. So we always have a socket set floating around. Mini sledges for driving in, EMT. Those are really handy and securing stuff down. I do use a lot of T-post, and having a dedicated driver for that and a dedicated puller for that is handy than trying to beat them in with a hammer. And those are handy. Scotch lock pliers is a big one. So it doesn't really even matter if you use Scotch locks or if you use Clickets or I think the M Connects, 3 Connects, whatever, the Mattis ones. They all have a very similar print depth. And so instead of just squeezing them with a pair of pliers, to have those that control the pinch and get you that perfect depth is helpful. And so I find myself using those a lot. These precision cutters, I buy those by the 2-3 pack. We probably got 6 pairs floating around during setup and during the season. You go out there and quickly clip a wire tie or clip a cable or clip some electric fence wire or whatever. Those are always in pockets and porches and everything else during the display. So I think those are really handy. Precision screwdrivers, like I said, go through and quickly tighten up connections. Another thing is with a set like this with the removable bits is you can put those in a small drill, and when you're setting up a bunch of Phoenix connectors, you can go out there and use a drill for that, and that's really handy. You don't want some giant 18-volt. I mean, you can, but if you're using a smaller one, the smaller 12-volt form factor ones, that's nice, and you can go through and quickly. I learned that from Ricky Cloutier at CCL. So instead of just wearing your hand out doing a whole bunch of them, you can go out there and put them in a drill, and that is mega handy. Pack out, so the big, you pick your favorite brand, but the Milwaukee pack outs, the Rugby's got a flavor, Rigid has a flavor. There's a lot of different ones, but having everything in dedicated toolboxes helps. We keep a toolbox, several toolboxes on the porch during the season that have different supplies in them, different tools in them, so I can kind of quickly get my hands on stuff. Headlamps, we have a few laying around that we go out there and we're always messing with. So as you go out there and need to throw something on and go look at things quickly, headlamp keeps your hands free, which is helpful. In the way of power tools, heat gun, so either butane or electric. I tend to do butane. A lot of people don't. If you can control the heat and kind of get further away with it, it's quick, and I like that. But most people use an electric or battery powered heat gun. Drill or impact drivers is just life. You're always going to have those handy. A good label maker, so I keep this Brady one around. That one's pretty good for me. I like it because it's got quality adhesives on the film and all that stuff. So I buy the name brand labels so they don't fall off. They're real nice. Grinder or chop saw. So I've got a metal cutting chop saw I use to cut EMT and T-post and everything else with. That comes in handy. But if you don't have the space or budget for that, and just get a grinder with a cutoff wheel, and that works great too. And that way you can cut through metal. A rotary hammer, that's probably a fringe tool. So that's kind of shown down bottom where I use to drill brick with. So it drills it really smoothly, really quickly. And if you can get it on sale, we've got a Ryobi outlet here in town that sells stuff really cheap. So if you can get your hands on one cheap, then it's a great tool to have for dealing with masonry. If not, you can use a hammer drill. It's just kind of a little bit more raggedy. So I like the SDS drills, the rotary hammers. A light that matches your cordless setup. That's a cool thing to have. So if you've got, all Milwaukee drills or DeWalt drills or Ryobi drills or whatever, having a light that accepts those cordless batteries is a lot more handy than you think. And so we'll do that. I've got a light and a radio that match my cordless batteries. So I'll go and snatch a radio, a battery off the charger, throw it into the radio so I can go listen to the tuner outside. And then I'll have, a series of lights as well. So I go and throw that in the bush or whatever that I'm working behind and see things. So that is a cool little hack that's good to do. Usually they're not very expensive if you've already got the battery system anyway, and those are handy to have. And then a multimeter. Learn how to use it before the season. You don't have to get something that's super duper expensive and complicated. If you can do voltage and continuity, that's pretty much what you need. And learn how to use that so you can troubleshoot things intelligently and quickly. It's amazing that people that get in the hobby that either don't have one or don't know how to use it. So do that. It'll make your life easy, and it doesn't have to be hard or complicated. So repairs and spares. And my philosophy is keep spare everything. Once again, we spend all of this time and money into this hobby, and you have a very short period of time. So if you're down for, just several days out of a 30-day season, you've lost 10% of your show, and that's the kind of best situation. So I think you do a couple things, and I'll get to the spares and things I keep. But I think you keep a spare everything. Find a vendor that's local-ish to you in your region so you can get stuff shipped quickly. We have great vendors nationwide in the hobby, but if you know kind of who's around you, like for me here in the Southeast, we've got Ken with WiredBots right there in Georgia, so he's one state away and stuff comes overnight. I got Robert with Pixel Now in my own state, so stuff comes overnight. And a few others. David with Experience Lights, Genius Controllers is in Tennessee, so stuff comes in a day or two. So if you know kind of the vendors around you, so the West Coast, you got Matos and Miner and things like that. So if you kind of know who's around you, that helps if you do have a disaster. But that shouldn't be your network because these guys are busy and may not always have stock at that time of year or whatever. But I would go ahead and kind of identify people that are close to you. That can help, and hobbyists that are around you as well. But with that, I would keep spares in stock. So I keep an SD card imaged with FPP, and this used to be more of a deal when they got corrupt. I don't think they've corrupted nearly as often in the newer versions, but I still do. I keep a fresh copy of FPP on an SD card because SD cards break and they wear out and they fritz out, and so or stuff just gets corrupt on them. And so that way I'm not fighting things. I'll just pop another card in and it's already imaged and I'll just re-download to it. I do keep a spare controller. Life's too short, season's too short. So if you don't have, a spare controller or you're not willing to get one, at least you make sure you have enough outputs where, the minimum you can go in there and reconfigure things and kind of plug things into a single controller. But I think you should just have one. It's good to have. It's good to be able to test with. It's good to be able to, keep one around and to make sure that you can keep, stay up and running. So do that. I keep a spare receiver built. I don't just keep it in a bag. I keep it built and on the shelf. And that I use more often than, it feels like every couple seasons I'm probably, switching a receiver out. The drivers kind of go bad on them and all that. So, and I'll lose just a single output. But once again, instead of troubleshooting it and having stuff dead, in the yard, I'll go out there and swap it out in the yard, bring it inside and figure that out, figure out what I need to do. So keep it ready to go. So connectors, whatever your preference is, click it, Scotch lock, solder sleeves, M-lock, 3-lock, whatever lock. Repairs are going to happen. You're going to lose pixels. And so be ready, have those things ready. And to that end, I've actually gone out there, and I think they sell these now too. I know they do. But you can go out there and have 2 pixels ready with connectors already crimped and all that, and be sure to identify the input and output side of it. But I have several of those ready to go, so I can go out there and cut out a dead pixel, crimp those in, and once again, not be looking for things and looking for connectors and looking for this and looking for that. I've got those ready to go in a place where I can get to them. So, like I said, you can make a few up and be ready to roll. And I find that to be beneficial. It makes the job. So once again, when it's winter and everybody's outside and watching and everything else, you just don't want to be finding stuff. It's always at night. It's always dark. It's always cold. And you always have an audience. So the quicker I can make that go, the better. Fuses, and once again, with modern controllers, different vendors are doing different things with e-fuses or, just different things, period. But you want to have some spare fuses on hand, at least if you've got a controller or if you've got expansion boards that match fuses or require fuses. Keep a few on hand. I can't be the only person that's had to go and rob one out of my car at night when I don't have a spare. So after that, I was like, I'm going to keep some spares on hand in my little repair box. And that way, if you do blow a fuse, you've got stuff on hand and you're not, not trying to figure it out. And it's cheap, and just cheap insurance, cheap things you can have on hand. So with that, those are my things. I didn't want to belabor it all. There's plenty of things to add as I went through this, and y'all have to drop me a line and tell me if you think it'd be beneficial. But I might publish the sheet out there. I've got it all in a document, a Google Doc, and we could go out there and kind of keep a living repository of things that are helpful. If people were into that, we could go out there and just have a list of things, a growing living document that kind of gets you started. So anyway, but if you got questions, feedback, let me know. I'd love to hear it.
All right, Russ.
What you got, Bobby?
No questions. I guess you're telling everyone what they need to know.
So amazing, and no questions.
Yeah. Great stuff. Thank you. Yeah, a lot of things. Even some things I'm going to go out and do. I never thought to label my prop with the year, for one thing.
Yeah.
You just look back and say, "Oh, this is when I got it."
Yeah, and I tell you, because after the fact, you're like, for instance, I had a really bad run in 2022 of Pixel. A lot of people did. We all had bad 2022 Pixels. And for the life of me, I've replaced everything, but it's still a fear of mine that I've still got these junk pixels and somewhere in this thing. And I'm going to find out the hard way, because I ripped them out and replaced them at anything that I knew and anything that was failing. But now I wish that that's when I started doing it, is because I didn't, I was at the point where I was pretty sure of the generations of things I had, but not positive. And so I was like, man, everything else I'm writing. And as I replaced them, I wrote replaced on, January 2023, and I would know when they were. So anyway, that's a hopeful thing.
Actually, we do have one question. Which fuse do you recommend taking out of your car?
Yeah,
So I'm guessing, it's, either the light show or the car, So
yeah, the car
if you
had to
blow
go.
that fuse,
The car had to go. So
I'm going to say probably the power windows.
yeah, it was. I don't know. I think I stole it out of the spares, but it was still. Yeah, something's got to go. So anything 5
cool.
amp.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for coming on and giving us this list of things that we've got to go back and check on too. So
Yeah, hopefully it helps. It was good to go through, and I think, like I said, you got some good information to work with up front, and it eases the pain of setting up and all. If you're not digging around for things and looking for things, and if you've got a pile of stock on hand, it makes setup go a lot better. So anyway, hopefully it helps.
Yeah, well, you get a lot of great information. I've been doing this for 5 years and still learning new tricks to setting up the show. Yeah, that's why we're doing these. I mean, whether you're brand new or you've been doing it for 8-10 years. I mean, I've been doing it since 2018, and I mean, there's still things I'm learning. But that's why we're doing these shows to help everybody out. And again, when we're doing these, please ask questions if you ever have any, and we'll get them answered for you. Well, Russell, thank you very much, and I'll see everybody next week. I don't have the topic yet, but it'll be good. We are progressing closer and closer to actual showtime. But all right, well, thank you, everybody, and have a good week. Bye.
Thanks.
Well, that's it for tonight's lesson in light-based lunacy. So smash that subscribe button, zap a comment below, and share your worst tech fail. We might even feature it in the next class. Until then, stay lit, stay learning, and always remember to bring a backup SD card. Night School dismissed.